and Brian from Headwaters Kayaks, and we're lucky enough to have Griff and Greg Blanchard here today talking about the last Shasta tournament we had out there, which was Wild West Bass Trail and the CABASS Nations tournament. So we've got a winner from each of them, since you could enter both, and each one of them only entered the one. So we've got two separate winners, but they both did really good. Both caught some awesome fish, and I don't know who wants to get into it first, but how was practice? How was the weather? What'd you do?
Go for it.
You want to go ahead?
All right, yeah, Griff.
All right, yeah. So just starting off with the practice day, right? We all know that we're just getting hit with these torrential storms right now. So it was a rainy day driving out there. Drove out there the morning of practice day, and as I was doing some research, I looked at the Jones Valley ramp, and that's where I decided to launch. So that's a ramp in the Pitt River arm. And as I was driving up to it, I heard that it was like a 2-mile dirt road. And with all that rain, I was a little worried about driving down it. So I was sitting there waiting, like, oh, where is it? Not exactly sure. And then I saw someone in their truck and a bass boat drive down. So I'm like, okay, we're good. Then just followed that bass boat down and ended up finding the launch all right. And then on practice day, I had some technical issues with my trolling motor, so I couldn't get my trolling motor to turn on. I think it got soaked in the rain, so I had planned to like run to the main lake and try to find some fish out deep, but I just ended up fishing near the launch, and I caught 4 fish on a jig and a Ned rig during practice day in about 10 feet of water. It was raining most of the day. I got pretty soaked and realized that my rain gear really did not work. So I needed to get back to the Airbnb and get warm and dry that off. So going into the tournament day with having 4 fish and a general idea of just, I had a semi-confidence knowing what the pattern was. So I found him in 10 feet of water, and I was just going to try to run that same pattern all day on tournament day. But on tournament day, we had a 2-hour delay because of the rain. So instead of launching at 6 a.m., we ended up launching at 8 a.m. And not only did my trolling motor not turn on again, but my graph wouldn't turn on because I think I got a bunch of water in my home. So I was just old school, no electronics
the whole day?
for the beginning of the day.
You had no power for the whole day? No fish finder, no motor?
Well, I ended up figuring out my fish finder, thankfully. But so it was about 8:15 when I caught my first fish, and I didn't want to like go up and try to troubleshoot my electronics and all that right after launching, because that time on the water is just so valuable. So
especially when at least 2 hours.
Yep. In that Pitt River arm, it was like chocolate milk water, and I just started flipping a black and blue Zoom lizard, like real shallow, right up against the rocks, and I caught a 17 3/4 inch spot on that about 15 minutes into the tournament, and then was feeling pretty confident after that fish. And I said, all right, I don't even need a graph. If they're in a foot of water, I'm just going to run that pattern for the rest of the day. And I tried that for about 3 hours, and then I was looking down, it's 11:30, and I still only had that one fish. And I'm like, all right, well, by then the rain had calmed down a little bit, and I said, all right, I feel comfortable enough to go like get up on the front of my boat and go in my hole and check my battery for my trolling motor. And luckily I had an extra Nocqua battery and plugged that in, and then my graph worked fine. And that really came in handy, because then I ended up kind of running out to the middle of the lake, and as I was doing that, looked down on my graph, and I just really saw like 2 arches and 50 feet of water on a hump. The hump itself was in about 30 feet, and then it was 50 to 60 feet all around there, and just dropped a Ned rig with a Yamamoto single tail grub down on him. And I think I got bit immediately, and by like, I would say noon, like 15 minutes to 30 minutes, I had caught 4 additional fish and filled out my limit. And then from there, I said, all right, well, I'll put down the Ned, try to upgrade, get something bigger. So I started throwing a Kitech jig with a twin tail grub on it. And within maybe 5 minutes of throwing that on the fall, I had that big largemouth. There was a 19-inch largemouth hit the jig, and that I couldn't really feel them bite the Ned rig, but when that largemouth hit, I was like, oh, that's something different. And
that's awesome.
yeah, I got that in the boat, and I knew that, I had a shot at that point. Really wasn't able to cull from there. Unfortunately, I didn't have any service on the lake either, and I knew I had a decent bag, so I wanted to make sure, like first and foremost, that I just got my fish uploaded in time, so I didn't want to get DQ'd. So at 2:20, I left my spot and just ran back, pedal power, and ended up making it back to Redding in time to upload my fish.
That's awesome. I remember in the last tournament that we were fishing, the last Shasta tournament out here last year, that's your go-to when it gets real tough, huh? That Ned with a single tail grub.
Yep.
That's a killer bait.
Yeah, I either like doing that, or I even just take a 5-inch Senko and then cut that like into thirds and just use like the smallest little head on that. But I just love that Yamamoto plastic, and I'll just drag it, not hop it at all.
Slow
But yeah, I
as
remember
possible.
last year at Shasta, Matt, we were in the same area, and it was a similar like offshore deal where we kind of found them.
You helped me almost get my limit. You're like, throw that. And I hooked another one or two, but I still didn't come in with a limit from that tournament. It was tough. All
Yeah.
these ones on Shasta, I guess it's the fact that it's in January makes it a little bit harder.
Well, it's surprising because I see on your Instagram, Matt, you're always crushing them at Shasta.
Yeah, sometimes, some days. But so Greg, you were in Jones as well then, right?
Yeah, I was. So got up there Friday evening, had a little room at Bridge Bay with Alden, Obedy, and Lawrence. And yeah, and like Griff said, we knew the weather was going to be crazy, something that I hadn't fished, I don't even know, ever. I mean, I fished in like a lot of rain, but given the rain, the air temps, just the wind, I think was the crazy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily the wind, but the gusts. Like that's one thing that I've learned over the years is you can't just look at the wind. You have to like look at the gusts, because the wind said 10 to 15 on Saturday, depending on which weather app you looked at, but it also said gusts 30 to 40 miles an hour. So I was not looking forward to Saturday. Sunday it was supposed to calm down a bit, but Saturday we went up to Sugarloaf. Just a really skinny part of the lake compared to the rest, and figured that we'd be able to get out of the wind if it got real gnarly. And we show up, me and Alden went out and pre-fished together. It was tough to find in the dark, man. Those dirt roads and everything makes it a challenge, but we eventually got there, and it was blowing. It was surprising because, I mean, you guys know the weatherman's not always right. We'll say that. There's, that's just how it is. But it was blowing. The gusts were just as forecasted, 30, 35 mile an hour. And we went out there. It was chocolate milk and Sugarloaf. We said, well, we're here. Let's fish. And, 3 hours. It's miserable. We're wet. The wind is screaming and not a single bite. So we pack up. And that's when we decided to go to the pit river arm. And what was crazy was when we got there, it was like calm. It was calm. It was nice. I mean, there were some sprinkles, some rain still. But we're like, what the heck? We thought for sure the bigger parts of the lake would have been way nastier with the wind, but it just wasn't.
Did you fish them both on Saturday?
What's that?
Did you fish them both on Saturday for pre-fishing?
Yep.
Okay.
So we started at Sugarloaf. About 11 o'clock, we packed up, went to the pit, and then launched out there. Immediately, it just looked better. I mean, once you got out of that little the pocket where the launch is, where it's real chocolate milky, dirty water, the main lake had it wasn't chocolate milk. It was 2-3 foot, just a nice tinge to it. It looked nice. All the flooded timber down there looked real juicy. So just just looked better. But I actually went almost all day. I think my first bite. And I was throwing everything during practice, because with this rising water, all this rain, I didn't know exactly what would be going on. I was hoping for some reaction stuff like spinner baits, A-rig stuff, cranking, not a single bite. And then I think around 2 o'clock, I got my first bite on a little Kitech finesse jig with a flapping hog trailer in about 20 foot, 15 to 20 foot on a point. So I didn't have much time left in practice, so I just started running some points, and I picked up 2 more small spots. And I was like, all right, well, this is good enough for me for tournament day. So tournament day rolls around. And by the way, we should mention at after practice, came to Headwaters. Sorry if we were a little late. There was no one else there. You guys kept the doors open, the lights on for us. So appreciate that. And also thank you for the food recommendation. The post office, shout out to the post office in Reading.
Mm-hmm. Post office in Reading.
Very good food. Beer was on point. So good call there. But yeah, I got started Sunday morning. A surprise showed up at the ramp, and some other guys were telling us that we had the 2-hour delay. Wish I could have slept in more, but it is what it is. But it was the right call because I actually went in my truck, tried to sleep a little bit more, could barely sleep. The gust, the wind, my truck was shaking. Like it was, I can't imagine being out in the kayak with those gusts and that downpour. So it was the right call. But yeah, I went out there and just said, we're going to go to those same points we got bit on during practice, those few bites, and just wing it. Probably throw the jig most of the day, mix it up with some other baits. And first spot I fished was the one I got a bite on the day before, and I think I caught 3 or 4 small spots right off that on the jig. It was a kind of an odd bite. It seemed like I had to throw it into deeper water, so sitting closer to the bank, throwing it out deeper into 25, 30, and slowly dragging it up. And that's when I would get bit. It was a weird angle deal, I feel like.
I see you shaking your head, Griffin. Were you having that too?
Yeah, definitely. You just had to drag it. Now, I don't know about you, Greg, but were all your fish on like rock as well?
Yes, all on rock. And the other interesting thing too is, and I'll talk about this more, but with all that flooded timber, all those trees, it seemed like the 2 key areas for me were areas that didn't have a lot of trees, maybe 1 or 2 trees.
Yeah.
And it's tough because
100%. The area that I found too, like it was the farthest away from any trees.
Yeah, and the trees look so good too. You think it's just like bass heaven in there, but no, that first spot had a couple trees on the point, and got those fish dragging. A lot of them were actually on the dead stick. I think the less action, the less movement, the better. Again, that little Kitech jig, I just like that. It's got the tungsten head. You can feel a lot of that bottom. And after that, I just moved on. I fished points. I went into the pockets a little bit, into the coves, into the creeks, and I didn't get anything. Everything was main lake points, entering into those areas. And like we talked about, the less trees, the better. Maybe they just, there was less of, not as much to hide in. Maybe they just couldn't hide as good. So junk fished. I threw a lot of stuff. Everything was coming on the jig. It wasn't like an on fire bite, but I'd say I'd get bit every 20 to 30 minutes if I was actually fishing. At one point I did pick up an A-rig, and, I figured because we know Shasta is the lake of 12 to 14 inch spotted bass. It's just one of those things you got to weed through 100 of them to get the good one. But I figured if I got bit on an A-rig, even though I didn't get a single bite in practice, it'd be the right one. And I think it was like my 3rd cast with an A-rig around some trees. I got slammed, and I doubled up, and it just bent me over. And I was like, this is the one. This is like, a giant. But I just had the spotted bass foul hooked, and it was sideways. And, when you have a sideways hooked on an A-rig, it feels like a 10-pounder. And it was like 14 inches. But it was whatever. I got the bite. Got a bonus largemouth on the jig, 16.5, big old tail. Those largemouth can be key. Only largemouth of the day. Filled out a limit, called up a few times, small calls. I think I was sitting around 75 at the time. And, that's not bad. I thought this would be a tournament where if you get 75, you have a chance. So I was happy with that. And really what happened was I went to the one area where I had multiple bites earlier in the morning, smaller bites, but went there around 12 o'clock and got bit pretty quickly. It was a 16-incher, I believe. So 16 inchers are money out on Shasta. I was happy with that. Then I think maybe 20 minutes later, I hooked into another one. Just felt like the same thing, just felt like a bite. You're reeling it up. I got a flash of it. I was like, ooh, that one's a long one. And got in the net, and I took a look at it. I was like, whoa, that's really long. Put it on the board, 18-incher. That's just a gift on Shasta. I mean, those are, and congrats to Griff for the 19-inch largemouth. I mean, I don't know how many fish you got to catch an 18 to 19-inch fish out on Shasta, but it seems like maybe 1 in 100.
Few and far between.
Yeah, so you're definitely lucky when you stick one of those. And then I just kept fishing that one bank the rest of the day. I think the one thing was these fish were pale, really pale. And I think what was happening was because of all this rain and the water coming up a little bit, I think these fish that I was catching were deep fish, and they were moving up on this bank to feed or to do whatever. But they were coming up, they were curious, and I just felt like these fish were moving up. So it was an area that was
How deep was that?
so I was still fishing 15 to 20, but
Okay.
I bet you these, and this was right off the main channel on a bank with not a lot of trees, a couple trees. And I think these fish were coming up from the main channel and just feeding.
So you think they were probably in like 50 plus and just moving up to come feed?
Yeah, I would bet. I highly doubt these fish were just sitting on that bank for the past day or so. I think these were fresh fish, and called up a couple more times, and I think I almost called everything I had in that spot.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was just, right place, right time. Fish clean, only lost one, got me hung up in a tree, fish story. Who knows how big it was? Felt big. Probably a 10-pounder, but we'll say, we don't know. Yeah, it's probably like that big. Yeah, just, fortunate to have a good event, a good finish after a pretty terrible practice. Practice was rough, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes, for me at least, the tougher the practice, the better the tournament you'll have. So
I was gonna say, it only matters on game day.
exactly.
I did want to ask too, on those Kitech jigs, they're small jigs, and you said you're throwing a flapping hog. I know they have a couple different sizes. Are you using the smaller size on that bait?
Yeah, 375, and then I bite off like a 1/4 inch. It actually takes off those two little balls at the very base, which whatever, but real compact, real finesse. And the I don't know. We make up stories as to why we think they're going to bite a certain bait, but I think that bulkier profile, and especially on a dead stick, I think that particular presentation looks good when it's just sitting on there, sitting on a rock or something. And that finesse jig, that tungsten creates some commotion when you're banging up against a rock. So that was, every bite I had was on that, minus the A-rig fish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with a jig. I know you like it as much as I do.
Yeah, love a jig. And I feel like they'll, on average, get better fish than like a drop shot or something like that. So
I've been fishing Shasta too much, so I don't think that's true anymore.
Yeah.
When you throw a jig all day and catch 12, 13 inches, big fish don't always eat a jig.
It feels bigger when you set it onto the casting rod.
Yeah. When you set the hook, they all feel big.
Yeah.
And then, if they're spots, they always feel big till you get them up to the boat. It's finally a good one. That's another 13-incher.
I know. It's fun though. I can't.
It is fun.
Can't
It
deny
is
that.
fun. It's the thunk. When you get one, I know, like you said, Griff, that 19-inch largemouth, like when they hit it and it's like, okay. Like that's my favorite part, when they really just doink it.
Yeah, to Greg's point, I mean, you're lucky to catch a largemouth like 1 in every 100 fish on Shasta. And that thing, I felt the bite, and then it came to the top, and like spots don't usually come to the top and try to jump. And I mean, I made a long cast, and I think it was at least in 50 feet of water. So it came to the top, and then I was skiing it on top of the water, which was a little weird, but luckily it had a good, I hooked it right in the top of the mouth, and it was a solid one. But I think that fish, I think, was just like suspending in maybe like 30 feet of water, and it was just complete.
Up on the fall?
Yeah, it ate it on the fall.
Oh wow! Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Unfortunately, I didn't have a bunch of slack in my line, so I felt the bite as it was falling down.
That's great. Man, well, it's cool that you guys kind of got on the same pattern, rocky banks without a lot of trees. I know I did talk to a couple of the other guys and got fishing reports, and the consensus was the same. I know you guys both know John Myers. He gave me some information that I'm going to talk about too, but he said, very specific, he said fist-sized rock. That's what he was looking for. And he wasn't fishing, I don't believe he's fishing trees, because I believe he launched out of Bridge Bay and went south. But yeah, he was talking about rocks as well. Like that was the thing. And to hear you guys in Jones, which if you fish Shasta at all, Jones is the land of trees everywhere, more stuff than you can flip at. And to avoid all those and fish the rock, I mean, it really shows that you guys found something that worked and were able to duplicate it throughout that area. And that's pretty cool. I mean, that's how you win these things. You find what works and you really stay on it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's in the Pitt River arm. It's so tempting just to want to fish the trees because it all looks so good. but yeah, it was definitely a rock deal.
That's awesome. Well, cool, man. Congratulations to both of you. I really appreciate you guys being on here. And hopefully you got the roughest tournament out of the year so far, and they'll only get a nicer, warmer, and a little drier from here on out.
Yeah, it was a brutal conditions wise. It was a fun tournament. You know, you look back on it, and it's fun to kind of we all came out alive first of all, and then then it was a fun one. I enjoyed it. I always Shasta.
When did you look back on it and you're like, man, you remember when we got our butts kicked by the weather at Shasta?
Yeah, it's always a good time there. I enjoy it. I'm glad we got there. It's a great fishery overall. I mean, I know it gets a lot of pressure, and we had the Wild West boat tournament or the team tournament the day before, so
they did well too.
What's that?
I heard the Wild West, I believe, won with 15 and some change, so they had a pretty good weight as well.
Yeah, I think that was the winning weight. Second was 12, and then just kind of went down from there. A lot of your standard 7 to 9 pound bags.
I didn't look. I didn't know how many people actually came in with a full bag, but I'm assuming with the conditions, not everybody.
You know what? I think there was a lot more than I thought. I thought for sure after practice, I was like, wow, that's going to be a tough day for him. But I think out of the 109 boats, I mean, don't quote me on this, but I think there was 80 limits.
Wow, that's impressive.
One limit's down to 6 pounds. I mean, I could be wrong, but there was a lot more than I thought. I thought it would have been, a tough one for even boaters, but they clearly caught him. So
sweet. Well, awesome. And I appreciate you guys coming in and buying some of our fishing gear. We're still trying to get people to know that we're carrying it. So it was nice to see it fly off the shelves. So thank you guys for that and coming out and honestly just seeing you guys. I miss you. I wish I could get out to every tournament or more tournaments and hang out with you. But definitely, whenever you guys come up here, let me know. We'll get out and go fish.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say your tackle is so well curated. It really came in handy because I bought the Ned heads. I was like, I think I need a little heavier Ned, and I bought a bunch of them there, and I used them on tournament day the next day. So I mean, props to you guys because you helped me out.
That's awesome. We're trying to get the classics that work on the waters around here and then some specialty stuff. So we're trying to get a few things. I think we're the only people in town right now that have the Kitech jigs, which one of the most killer baits up here.
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, we'll keep it quiet. But yeah, I enjoy the tackle shop. It's fun. I mean, how can you go wrong? It's like when you put together a tackle warehouse order, nah, I don't need that, but I get it all in for the shop, and it feels good. Well, I wanted to talk about what Julio did, and he was out there with you, Griff, right? Or launching around the same time, same place?
Yeah, we practiced together and stayed together.
Oh, did you guys fish together most of the day? Or close?
Not on tournament day, but yeah, we practiced in the same area.
Okay. Well, he was saying that he got most of his fish in 10 to 20 feet. Some came on trees, but again, most were off the rocks. No reaction bite, and then the Ned rig and the shaky head were his go-to. And he was throwing the 4-inch green pumpkin Ned. So I think that's the big TRD, the big turd. And then the Zoom shaky head worm. So that one is kind of like a trick worm. It's got a little bit more tapered tail. And then if you want to check him out too, it's J. De La Rosa Jr. if you want to check him out on Instagram. And I know I'd like to get some people sent your ways. I actually don't know what yours is off the top of my head, Greg.
Instagram, Greg Blanchard 17.
Okay. And then I know Griff, yours is just Griff Garrabrant. So that's nice and easy. And then, so John Myers, like I was saying, was out there, and I believe he finished in third. So he said, he's specific. He's been doing it for a long time. He knows what he's looking for, but he said fist size rock on offshore humps and points that extended way off the bank. So I know he was fishing a little bit deeper. And he wanted to get really that kind of grab in your lure when you're pulling it through the smaller rocks where it's coming through every time, but you feel that resistance. He said that was the key to his getting bite. If he felt that, he was confident he was going to get bit. He was fishing in 20 to 30 feet and then 50. So he had him in a range as well. But it was a slow and dead sticking like you guys were talking about. It was really, really about dragging. He was doing a 1/4 ounce tube and a Carolina rig with a good old baby brush hog, dark green pumpkin. Can't go wrong with baby brush hog. And then that is it for Shasta. And I know one of our other fishing team's guys, James Robertson, he got out on Bullard's Bar. So I want to talk about that a little bit too. Caught a few fish in the 3 to 5 foot range on a jerkbait. He said the water clarity was about 3 foot and it was 49 degrees. So it's a little bit cold water, but he still did really well dragging an Ed rig and dragging a Carolina rig. So if that shows you anything, all these places, this cold water, kind of dingy or stained water now. It's about fishing it really, really slow and just having some patience. And apparently, look for rock.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, now that you said about John, I tried some points that had some of that big chunk rock and bigger boulders, and I don't think I got bit. It had to be more smaller sized rocks. So for whatever reason, that seems to be
interesting.
True.
I wonder if it's because those flatter banks, if they're swimming blind like they're doing in the darker water, they don't have to worry about getting around obstacles. Maybe it's just I'm to the bottom and I can travel uninterfered. And I do see a question somebody gave for you, Greg. It said, do you wish you had the 12-foot kayak in Saturday's conditions?
I assume they mean the 12 native, the Titan.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, that because what were you running yesterday?
10.5.
What were you running in the tournament?
Titan
The
10.5.
Titan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, I felt, despite it being super sketchy, I never felt in danger. I mean, we were playing it safe. We were hugging the bank. There's, the biggest thing was those rogue gust winds. Like, you just feel like you're getting punched. Like, they just come out
They
of
hit you in the face.
Yeah.
They're weird.
If the wind was any worse, like if it was, getting a little chop, a little white cap deal with those gusts, there's no way I'd be out there because that's like the recipe to flip. Like best chance, wind and gusts, you're gonna flip. But no, I thought the 10.5 was fine. I felt fine the whole time. Never sketched out too bad.
Yeah, very stable boats, those Titans. And the thing with those rogue gusts too is you see them coming. If you're looking across the water, you see it start to chop and move before, and then you just get blasted. Yeah. It's a strange feeling. I've been out on the lake with that happening on a day they say, oh yeah, 10-mile-an-hour winds, and that kicks up. It's a little odd, especially if you're not expecting it and you kind of like, is this going to be what the rest of the day is going to be like? But definitely, I'm glad you pointed out the safety. If the conditions are bad, that's why they had a 2-hour delay. It's not worth going out there and running into trouble. So get out there and have fun. You could put yourself in some bad conditions, but be smart.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
You've been quiet this whole time. Would you like to talk?
Yeah, no, I'm rolling up to Bridge Bay in the morning. I called Tim right off the bat, and I was like, "Hey, man, it's looking a little rough." I actually almost didn't make it because they closed the highway off right there at Fondale, so I got stopped right off the bat at like 4:45 in the morning, and made a few phone calls, and we finally made the decision to push it back 2 hours, and I think it was a good call. I mean, the rain, it really kind of started to taper off, 9-10 o'clock for you guys. So you did get a few hours of some dry fishing, I think, at least. So
yeah, I think at one point the sun even came out. I was like, wow, I haven't seen the sun in like a month. That's what
it feels like, yeah.
Well, that was nice. So, I don't know if you, I was soaking wet. Just my rain gear is not up to par. So I need to invest in some new.
I don't like. I
can get you some Habitat or NRS stuff.
Yeah, but with that amount of rain, when it is like a straight up downpour, like just I don't care what we were talking about this earlier. Actually, it's like doesn't matter what rain gear you have, unless you're maybe in a dry suit, you're just gonna be wet. It doesn't matter. Everything just gets wet somehow. It was a fun drive home and soaking wet clothes. But,
yeah, hopefully you had some dry clothes in the car. But that's the mental battle of fishing when it's like that, or 110 degrees.
Yeah, I'm not even sure which I'd prefer. It's like tough to say.
That's hard to say. 110
I was
degrees.
actually
You jump in the water.
I was going to say I was thankful that my trolling motor was dead because I was shivering at one point, and I'm like, well, at least I can just like kick around and get warm. So I was staying on that 360 drive and just working it to stay warm.
That's awesome. Well, I know we only had one question. I see there's still like 30 people watching. If anybody's got any questions, somebody said the Sims Pro dry, 100% dry all day. That was from Abel. So apparently that's what you should invest in.
Nice.
Good to know.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations. I think we're wrapping it up unless somebody jumps in with something else at the end of this as far as questions go. But I really appreciate you guys being on here and talking about how you did so well in this tournament, and good luck on your next ones. And there's going to be a lot of fun ones. Did graphs help? I'd say they did for sure. I know you, Griff, were talking about stumbling over a hump. You're like, oh, there's fish there.
Yep, exactly. Just finding that hump. And I just stumbled over it by chance. And then I had marked 2 fish on it. And then I switched over to my topo map. And I was like, oh, okay. So this is a hump. And it's just kind of coming up right in the middle of the lake. And then once I kind of discovered like the topography around it, then I backed off it a little bit and like dragged up the hump. So 100% the electronic handy.
Did you guys use side imaging or down imaging at all throughout the day?
I did. I would say that was really the main purpose of my graph, was identifying the depth as to which I was fishing, and then side imaging to, again, the smaller rock, going back to what John said, smaller rock seemed to be key. I don't know if I can't say that I knew that at the time, but I was definitely looking on my side imaging to identify rock. If it was just desert or sand or clay or whatever, I wouldn't even bother. So you see the bank, it looks like there's rock extending all the way down, and sometimes there is, but sometimes there's not. So you could be wasting your time if you don't have side imaging and you can't really identify the bottom.
That's a really good point, because if you're looking at the bank, you're like, oh, it's got to go all the way down like that, and it's not the case all the time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely utilize your electronics if you've got them. Proves that live sonar isn't needed. Yeah, you guys did beat out a lot of guys with live imaging. There's something to be said.
Yeah, I didn't even really graph any fish. I mean, I graphed fish. I think a lot of my fish were on the bottom, tight to the bottom, coming up, just cruising up the bank and eating. So, yeah, I mean, it could have played a factor, but.
I wonder too if since the water was rising and you guys both talked about fishing uphill a little bit, I wonder if maybe if there was crawdad or bait, they don't want to be in that deep of water either, where they were sitting in like 30, 40, 50 maybe. Now they're sitting in 60, 70, 80. Maybe they're migrating up too, and maybe that's what the bass are following or migrating up with them. But that's going to be where the bait is if it's all moving up.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I'm not sure exactly why they're moving up. I want to say it was because of the rain.
The reason.
Yeah, I mean, we're just making it, just guessing, but I do think that because of the rain, fish were moving up.
Colton asked, how many rods did you bring with you, and how many did you actually use?
I brought 8 all weekend. I brought a crankbait, a little top spin, drop shot, A-rig, a deep diving crankbait, jig, and I think I had a spoon, and it wasn't a topwater.
No?
Maybe a small spoon. I don't know. I didn't bring much because I already kind of knew what I wanted to do there. And if it was going to work, it was going to work. If it wasn't, then whatever.
Yeah, and I brought 7 rods. So I brought a crankbait, jerkbait, A-rig, T-rig, Ned rig, and jig. And then I made a point on practice day that I always try to just use every one. At least I feel a little bad when I don't throw one at all. So I at least gave 1 cast to each of them. And then on tournament day, I mean, I really only used the jig and Ned rig. I did try throwing the A-rig around, but so probably really only 3 rods on tournament day.
Awesome. That's pretty reasonable compared to a lot of guys that I see out there. There's a lot of guys out there that got double-digit rods.
Well, I'll say this. I think that would have been a good idea because there's no worse thing to do than change a bait and retie a line in cold, rainy weather with wind. So if anything,
that's
all those
true.
rods have every single bait you might need, and then you don't have to like cut one off and tie something else on. I'd avoid that if I could.
Yeah, that's true. When you can't even tie knots because your fingers hurt.
And just the wind, and your hands are frozen. It's tough.
Good times. Well, I think that's going to be it. Unless
Yeah,
you got anything
I got
else.
nothing.
Congratulations. Good night. Thanks for joining us. And hopefully we see you guys up here soon. If you make any trips up, give us a call.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
All right. Until next time,
Thanks for having us.
stay fishy, my friends.
Thanks, guys.